Are safe and well. Trina, so nice to have you joining us from Rome. And Fabrice, you're in Paris, and recently Judy was in London. We have all sorts of European majestic sites that we get to be part of. Plus, some of us are in Westchester, so that's nice. Good morning, everyone. I hope that you and yours are safe and well. Natalie, you're remembering your mom's birthday today. Today's Torah is in memory of your mother and in honor of her birthday. You're remembering your cousin Norman, thinking of him too, and sharing in my own life. I have a dear friend, Ray Lifchez, who died just yesterday morning, a brilliant, beautiful human being with eyes like the sky. And so I'm bringing his memory into today's learning too. Let's learn some Torah. Parshat Nitzavim and Parshat VaYelech come together. They're two short parshiot at the end of the book of Deuteronomy, and they are full of urgency. Moses is trying to make sure that we listen well to the voices of the past, including his own, because he knows that very soon he won't be with us any longer. The power of his words is actually more his heart speaking. There isn't new information here. A lot of Deuteronomy is a recapitulation of the stories that we've experienced since Moses' birth. It compounds the teaching, it amplifies them with the urgency of mortality. And so when we read this parsha, it can feel daunting, not because of the new information, but because of the intensity. Emotion is a really important part of tradition. Anytime I've been in a space, not just Jewish space, but a spiritual space that hasn't touched my heart, I wonder, where is the disconnect? Is it in me? Is it in the presentation? Is it in the moment of history that we're in? Because spirit is not meant to be only something we experience with our heads. Whatever you believe about God, this is supposed to matter and mean something. For Moshe, it meant everything. For 40 years, he tried to liberate a people, both from external circumstances and then the limitations of their own breath. You might remember that when Moses first returns to Egypt to tell his fellow Israelites that they are going to be freed, they couldn't hear him. Why? Mikotze ruach, because their spirit was attenuated. Their breathing was caught. It was short. It was hard to breathe. Their lungs were so constricted by circumstance, by their loss of their own dignity generations back after generations of enslavement. So when we hear Moshe in these two Torah portions, knowing that this is the last day of his life, not only do we know this information, but it thunders in us through Moses' voice through the years. Now, this coming Saturday night, we're also going to be davening, many of us in Ashkenazi synagogues, Slichot, which is the beginning of the high holiday season. It is the beginning of the familiar melodies. It is also a return of deep emotionality for those of us who have a nostalgia and a powerful connection to the high holidays. What an amazing thing it is to begin this season tomorrow night. But in this parsha, there is the key, I think, to holding on to not just our humanity, but the accessibility of the world and the accessibility of spirit. In this parsha, we have these words. We have a lot of commands, a lot of intensity, and then in chapter 30, verse 11 of the book of Deuteronomy, I'll read you the Hebrew and then the English. Ki hamitzvah hazot asher anochi metzavcha hayom lo nifleit hi mimcha velo rechoka hi. Lo v'shamayim hi lemor mi ya'aleh lanu hashamayma v'yikacheha lanu v'yashmienu ota v'na'asena. V'lo me'ever layam hi lemor mi ya'avor lanu el ever hayam v'yikachea lanu v'yashmienu ota v'na'asena. Ki karov elecha hadavar me'od beficha uvilvavcha la'asoto. Listen to the English translation here. Surely this instruction which I enjoin upon you, Moshe is speaking. Remember, it's Moses. Surely this instruction, this mitzvah, which I enjoin upon you this day, is not too baffling for you, nor is it beyond reach. It is not in the heavens that you should say, who among us can go up to the heavens and get it for us and impart it to us so that we may observe it? Neither is it beyond the sea that you should say, who among us can cross to the other side of the sea and get it for us and impart it to us that we may observe it? No, the thing is very close to you, in your mouth and in your heart, to observe it. Think about this for a moment, friends. Moshe, on one level, is saying, Torah is yours. These commandments are not too much for you. You can do it. You can live. But then, if you listen closely, you shouldn't think that it's in the heavens, lo b'shamayim hi. Because if it's in the heavens, you might say to yourself, who can go up there and get it? By the way, remember it's Moshe speaking. Who went up a mountain into the clouds to receive the instruction, the mitzvah, for us? Moshe. So he says, lesson 1, it's not up there. You don't need me to access this Torah. It's karov elecha. It's close to you. B'ficha, in your mouth. Uvil vavcha, in your heart. By the way, if you weren't clear that he was talking about his own leadership here, saying my big goal is not to be necessary. My big goal is your self-sufficiency. Listen to the second thing he says. It's not across the seas so that you should say, who can cross to the other side of the sea and get it for us? Who split the sea? Now, of course, God. But who was the human being standing in front of us? Moshe. You don't need a miracle worker, says Moshe. You don't need someone who can go to heaven, says Moshe. The biggest gift that Moshe gives is he says, you don't need Moshe to live forward. The responsibility of every generation is that it shouldn't be necessary for the next. Now, the previous generation is a gift and a treasure, conveying wisdom and physical support and emotional well-being as much as possible. But the self-sufficiency of the next generation is the mandate of the current one. I look at the children of our world. They will grow up with knowledge we wish they didn't gain, experiences we wish they didn't have. I can recite some of them. The blasphemy of a bulletproof backpack, the terrible fear of climate disaster come to mind as two unfortunately easy to access tragedies that they know better than any grown-up alive today does. And when they are in charge, because please God, that day will happen soon, I bet they will look back at our generation, the current generation in charge, and say, they were waiting for someone to come down from heaven to tell them to do the right thing. They were waiting for someone who would come and split the sea. But you know what? Why were they waiting? They were right there. The answers were in their mouths and in their hearts. And they forgot. May our children not forget. May they teach us, while we still have the reins of power, how to do the right thing. Remember that in the desert, through Moses' life experience, there were two generations. The generation that made it out of Egypt but had an enslaved mentality. And they died in the desert. They couldn't handle the intense circumstances of their own freedom. A lot to say about this. We don't blame them. But they came from where they came from. And their children born into the rugged wilderness had a different capacity to imagine and forge a future. This, friends, is what we need to do. My friend, my teacher, and I see Deborah's here, our friend, our teacher, Lifchez, taught me something incredibly important. He was a brilliant architect, a literary mind, a sweet soul, and when he left the world just yesterday, a lot of his language came back to me. He said how hard it is as a human being. He showed me as an architect how hard it is to draw a straight line. Now, when you say, can you draw a straight line? Of course I can, but no, I can't. The simplest of tasks, which is necessary for the construction of anything that will be sustainable, drawing a straight line so that my plan, my blueprint for a building, for a structure, it's not easy to do. Moshe is showing us that it might not be easy to do, but it's possible. You can do it. You can build a structure that is sustainable, that will sustain even those to come. Because the beginning of these two Torah portions that we read this Shabbat says, not only with you do I make this covenant, but with those who are not here yet. Our big task as we begin this year, as we begin Slichot tomorrow night, is to situate ourselves humbly, to do everything we are called to do so that those who come next have a covenant to inherit, a structure to sustain, a next generation to train. If we see ourselves as essential, we are not seeing clearly. We are worthy. We are precious. But we are not the only ones who matter. If we do our jobs right, those to come will know that we were thinking of them. That's beautiful work to do in the world. Lo b'shamayim hi. It's not up in the heavens. It's not across the sea. It's right here. You and me. These commands are for us to fulfill for the sake of those to come. Amen. Let's sing our way into a good Shabbos, friends. Shabbos, friends. See you on Monday.